What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Scale News Update. If you're not familiar with the show, this is where we talk about the news topics that happened in the scale world of RC over the past week. If you enjoyed the Scale News Update, hit the like button, and let's jump into this week's topics. First for this week, released yesterday, was the Redcat Gen9. This is an updated version of the Redcat crawler, previously the Gen 8. It has a lot of similarities, but it has a lot of updates. They kind of touched in almost all of the areas of the vehicle. The axles are updated, the transmission now has a 2-speed, the body is a licensed Scout 800 now. So pretty much everything has been touched, even if it hasn't been completely changed. I'd say the biggest things to mention are that the axles now have universal style shafts rather than the CVDs. The 2-speed is a usable difference between first and second gear, and a Scout 800 is a far better choice than a Scout 2 any day of the week. So those are the key points, but if you'd like to hear all of the specific details about it, I did have a video on the release of it, and I'll link that in the description below. You can go check that out. I show it all on the bench, and then we take it out and throw it against some rocks. Oh, also, it's crazy heavy. Like the heaviest 1.9 RTR I've ever seen as far as box stock goes. Oh, and add another tick in the new RTR discussion that we're going to keep track of for the year. Next, for any of you SCX6 owners or just large scale crawlers in general, NSDRC released a 1500 ounce-inch winch that you can install in those trucks. It is a low profile 1/5 scale size servo. So if you've got an SCX6, or I mean, if you just want to be ridiculous, I guess you could also put it in other things, but it's a massive, well, low profile, but massive. Anyway, it's a winch for the big stuff. It includes the servo itself, as well as the spool, as well as winch line and a winch hook. So everything that you need, get in there. It is a direct power. You can run it, of course, off of multiple voltages, but for optimal performance, you'll want to run it on some direct power to get all 1500 ounce inches of your money's worth. So if you're interested in finding out more about that winch, check the link in the description. Quite some time back, we had talked about this Kingkong all-terrain transport RC vehicle. It looks like the Sherp, the full-size versions, and I think there's also like a custom-made RC one. But Kingkong had released imagery of one that they had coming, and it looks like they've released that. They're available for order now, and the price is actually much more reasonable than I thought. Listed right now on eBay for $316. It is a kit version, not an RTR, so you'll have to provide some of your own electronics. It does include motors, so you don't have to buy that, but you have to buy a few other things to go with it. $316.79 to be technical. However, I was like, that's not a terrible price, kind of, but there's a $110 shipping fee. And that kind of killed it for me, because $316 on its own, I was like, that could be fun. I mean, it's pointless, but that could be fun. But then the extra $110, I don't know. What do you think the right price is for this thing? It does seem pretty pointless. Next, Tamiyas announced the re-release of the FMC XR311 kit. And on the Tamiya website, Tamiya's first RC Buggy. This is a re-release version of the 1/12 scale RC XR311. And I guess I was unfamiliar what the first Tamiya kit ever released was, but now we know. It's an interesting looking military little vehicle, one that I wasn't aware of the full-size version, although I'm sure there's one that looks just like it. The initial release of this buggy was done in 1977, and lucky for all of us, we get the same experience because they still use the same bushings and JIS screws. Nostalgia. Next, we have a new 1/18 scale. This is from Hobby Plus. This is the CR18, and this is a ring and pinion style axle, but with portal gears. So it's similar to the FMS vehicles. I have had some of the Hobby Plus vehicles before, and even when they said 18th, they were very similar to their 1/24 scale, but usually just with a little bit longer wheelbase. The Hobby Plus models that I've owned in the past haven't been as nice of quality as some of the more mainstream 1/24 and 1/18 scale. But the style of this is somewhat appealing to me. It's kind of the Unimog style front cab with a tube bed rear. Something a little bit different. I like it, and it makes portals specifically quite appropriate. So a nice mix. I want to thank Team GarageHack for sponsoring this month of the Scale News Update. In previous weeks, we've gone through and discussed the overall definition of overdrive, how to calculate gear ratios, and a number of educational type topics. This week, just a quick discussion on motors. Now, there's a ton of different types of motors that work in a ton of different types of vehicles that you'll commonly see in our type of area. Brushed motors, brushless motors, in-runners, out-runners, 4-pole, 6-pole, 14, tons of different types of motors. And if you've never changed out a motor or gone motor shopping for something wildly different than what you've been using, it can be a little daunting. You know, you see people like, why do people like running these in-runners? Why do people like running the all-in-ones or the big 4-pole motors with a ton of wheel speed? Like, why do I want to choose one over another? And that can be a really long, in-depth discussion. But luckily, Team GarageHack did do a live video on YouTube last week. One of their first ones. They did a great job. And if you're interested in kind of learning more in depth about all of the different types and kind of why some of them may be better for you than others, it's a video that's worth going to watch. There's no way that we could even cover the basics of each type in a little segment like this. So go check that video out if you get a chance, and I'll link it in the description below. And again, thanks to Team GarageHack for sponsoring this week of the Scale News Update. Looks like FMS is going to be releasing a new civilian version of the People's Car, or the VW Beetle. And again, another release that's skirting that licensing, but I think that Beetle may be outside of that window. But this one is being called the People's Car. It looks like it's running the same setup as the Kubelwagen was before, with the portal rear axle to it. And it's coming in a gray versus the desert tan color that the last one was released in. It is 4-wheel drive though. It got a shaft drive up to the center of the pan chassis and going out to each of the front wheels. So at least to be able to get out of its own way off-road. You don't have to worry about it completely getting stuck all the time. Kind of cool, detailed. The steering wheel turns with the servo and the full amount of detail that you're used to seeing. You know, there's a spare tire under the hood or in the frunk, whatever you want to call it. But again, ton of cool detail. If you want something that is not capable but looks kind of cool, or looks like a Beetle, depending on how you feel about that, then it looks like it's coming soon. G-Speed finally released a new version of their chassis lineup. This is the V4. Looks like this one's set up for kind of an adjustable front motor mount. You can move it forward, backward, and also have some up and down adjustment as well. Along with the chassis rails, they've got their full line of cross braces and skid plates, sliders, link sets that are offered from many companies, but specifically for the chassis, making it an option where you can actually build and have a parts list of available parts that you need to complete a truck. There's a ton of flat rail chassis out there, not a ton of difference in a lot of them, but the ecosystem that surrounds them does make each of them a little bit different. And for that, this one is set up pretty well. Next, to the topic that I wanted to discuss the least. Last week, we lost a friend here in Northern California, Brandon Tomy. He was the co-founder of ASD Crawlers. ASD Crawlers put on the events like the Autism Awareness Crawl, as well as Crawl Masters, and helped with events like Crawl for the Cure and the RC4 Drive West Coast. They were always everywhere. They were just everywhere. And Brandon was always everywhere with them. Brandon was always, big smiles and big energy. This channel's proof that I'm not often at a loss for words, but, a lot of people got to meet Brandon, and I think that you're all probably better because of it. There's a lot of us who will miss Brandon, and if you feel the desire, there is a GoFundMe to help his wife with any unforeseen costs that could arise from his sudden passing. So I'll put that link below. And now for one of the most difficult segues I've ever made, 2023 events. Events are an amazing opportunity to go meet some amazing friends. So with that being said, a number of the big events for 2023 have had dates announced here recently, and I just haven't covered them yet in the news. But Axial Fest East, West, and Proline by the Fire all had their dates posted. If you're interested in any of those, June 21st to the 24th is Axial Fest Badlands. Axial Fest West is July 19th through the 22nd, and Proline by the Fire is September 22nd and 23rd. 3rd. There's also a bunch of other great events. On the East Coast, you do have like the Beat the Creek event. K&K Hardware did announce yesterday that they will not be continuing the Team K&K TTC. That event has come to its end, so that one will not happen any longer. But there are other great events that happen on the East Coast as well, including USTE, which I believe is coming up in February. Make an effort if you have the ability to go to events. It's a great time, and you meet great people, and also you get to RC. This week, come join Matt and I for Livestream Takeover. This week, we will each be listing 6 items on eBay. Each of us 6 listings, and they're going to start Wednesday during the live stream. They're going to go for 1 week, so they're going to end the following live stream. 6 different listings each in 6 different categories that we came up on last week's show. Should be a good time, and there's some interesting stuff that's going to be listed, at least on my side. I don't know what Matt's are yet, but I think it could be good. So come check that out, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And of course, Friday Night Live, as always, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where I sometimes get something done and sometimes just sit here at the bench and answer a bunch of questions. At the end of last week's show, we talked about how many new RTRs you thought would get released in 2023. We talked about the number from last year, which I think was like 59. Or guesses for this year, I felt like we're lower than last year. However, we're 2 weeks into January and we're already at 4. So pumping these numbers up already. I don't know. Maybe we're in the beginning half of the year where you usually have that ramp up. It can be a little bit faster. Then we have the summer slowdown before the end of the year ramps up again. I don't know. I think it seems like we're on a pretty good track to have a pretty high number again. We'll see how that goes. But for this week, I wanted to bring it back a little bit. I want you to just tag or list a friend you've made through RC, someone who's helped you or you looked up to, or you've just enjoyed having along for the ride, even if you've never met them in person. Drop it in the comments below. With that, let's have a better 2/3 of January. This first one has been rough. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, whatever. Be happy. We'll see you guys next week.